Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about the packages information here. So in the last example, we discussed about the different kinds of the packages example as well as the access modifier example we identified here. So now what I will do today, we are going to discuss about the one of the another important concept to call interfaces. So before going to discuss about the interfaces, first we need to understand the abstract classes. Okay, inside the abstract classes, now what we are doing here, we are trying to create the abstract methods as well as concrete method. We are trying to create the abstract methods as well as the concrete method. So, but inside the interfaces, whatever the method we are going to create, all are the abstract method. We are not going to create any concrete method. Okay, and by default, all the methods public and abstract here. By default, all the methods public and abstract here. So this is we need to understand the interfaces information here. Okay. So same way like how we created inside this particular abstract classes. So for example, if I'm going to open this abstract class, we are trying to define the one method. Call me. This is a abstract method. Okay. And the same way, what we are doing is we are trying to create a this method like concrete method. This is applicable inside this particular abstract class. We can create a both concrete as well as abstract method. But inside this particular interface, we are going to create only abstract method. But how we are creating this all the abstract method? So I'm going to explain one simple example. So here we are going to create the keyword called interfaces. But right now I'm trying to define the package name first here. Now you can see interface is a keyword we cannot use here. So for that, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to use a capital I, so that this is the package will contain this particular package will contain the all the interface related example here. So how I'm going to create interface here with help of this particular keyword called interface, and name of the interface we need to specify here. So same way how we are specifying the name of the class, same way we are going to specify the interface name here. Now understand carefully callback. So callback is one interface I'm trying to create. Now observe carefully. This is the keyword is now changed here. So earlier we discussed about the class. Now we are discussing about the interface here. Getting the point? So this is the how we are defining the interface with help of this particular keyword called interface. We are going to create interface, and the name of the interface we are having this callback here. And here what happens internally, we can define the methods and we can define the variables here. For example, I'm trying to define the variables here. Okay, int value is equals to 10. Now observe carefully. Now what happening internally? So now see carefully here the error I'm getting. Why I'm getting this error? Illegal modifier for the interface field callback dot value. So it's only accessible public, static, kind of final. Getting the point? So what you understand here? Whatever the variable we are declaring here, we cannot define the private here. Why we cannot define the private here? Because the callback cannot contain the fully implementation. Totally it is a abstraction. So this information we are going to implement it by the one of the implementation class. So for this purpose now, if we are trying to provide the variable as a private, how we are going to access this variable here? Because inside this particular interface, all the methods we are going to make as a declarations. We are not going to create the method body here. Okay. For this purpose, we cannot use a private here. The whatever the variable we are using, the variable should be public. Getting the point? Now you can see the variable. We can go for the public here. And if I'm removing this, what happening internally? So I'm not getting any error. For example, if I'm going to make as a final, nothing. Getting the point? So just I'm trying to provide the information. So what happens here? So static final I'm giving it. Static final into value. The value I'm giving as a 10 here. Okay. So observe carefully. Now what we need to understand here, this particular information, we cannot use the private access modifier. So we can go for the default access modifier. Now you can see the protected. Any issue here? For this particular protection, we are getting an error. Okay, observe carefully the protection also, we are getting an error. Now you can read this. You can read this particular error message. Now we'll understand here why this error is coming like this. So illegal modifier for this particular interface, callback.value only public and final or permitted. So this is the error I'm trying to print here. Now, so read this particular error, you will understand here why we are getting an error here. So this is the illegal modifier we are providing here. What is the illegal modifier here? This is the protected. Protected is the illegal modifier for this particular interface. What is the interface name here? Something like callback. And what is the variable we are having? Value. And only public, static, final are permitted here. Getting the point. Now we understand here private is not the access private we cannot use inside the interface, and protected also we are not able to use. So we'll see if I'm trying to remove this, what happens here. So still we are getting an error. So now why we are getting an error? Protected basically whenever you're trying to create an object here, whenever you're trying to create an object here, so this particular section of code it will give an error here. Okay, so because of that we cannot go for the protected. So if you remove this, we will not get any error here. If you remove this particular protected, we are not going to get any error. What are the modifiers is applicable? Public, static, and final. Getting the point. This is important information we need to understand regarding this particular variables here. And whatever the method we are going to write here, so how we are going to write here? Simply you can write here. So for example, I'm trying to define public abstract. Okay, the method will not return anything, and the method I'm going to write as a show. Okay, so this is method declarations. Getting the point. We are trying to declare the method inside this particular callback interface. Now for example, if I'm trying to use this, now what happens internally? We are getting an error. So we understand here we are not going to use the keyword called public, because public abstract basically it will share the information to the compiler. This method does not contain any body, so just it is declared. But right now I'm defining the body here. Getting the point. So public void show method, and I'm having the method body. If I'm trying to print something, okay, if I'm trying to print something, so still it is giving me an error. Okay, method inside this particular interface, but still we are getting an error. So what we need to understand here? So if you observe carefully, we cannot define the method body here. We cannot define the method body. What we need basically, we need to provide the method declarations. Otherwise, we can go for the otherwise we can go for the one of the important concept called default here, and along with this particular default, we can define the static here. We can define the static. These two are the applicable. First one is the default one, and second one is a static here. We'll discuss about this particular default and static. Basically, these two information, the default and the static, these two informations are introduced from the 1.8. Before 1.8, we are not going to declare any method. So just like we will declare all the method, but we are not going to come up with a method body. So from the 1.8, we are going to write the method like this. For example, if I'm removing this particular static keyword, again we'll get an error. Again we'll get an error. Either what is the best way of writing? Either we can declare the method, or you can define the method body with help of this particular default or static. Okay, but right now what we will do, we'll try to define all the declaration method, all the declarations method here. Getting the point. And here, if I'm not adding any the default access, when we are not adding any access modifier, so the default access will give you the result here. Getting the point. The default access is going to give you the result, that now we identified here, and basically the methods here. For example, private void show method. Now you can see I'm getting an error. So why I'm getting this method whenever I'm making as a show, I'm getting an error. So we'll see the particular error why it is providing. This method requires a body instead of a semicolon. Getting the point? Or now you can see two suggestions we are getting. If I'm going to add a body, still we'll get an error. Getting the point? But here there is no use of this particular method body. Getting the point? Even if I'm trying to define the method like this, what is the use of this particular show method? Show method, what happens internally? You can write the message. So same the logic, the message I'm writing is method inside the interface. But observe carefully, whenever I'm trying to define the method as a private, what is the use of this particular private here? If it is a class, we are going to create an object, we can access the method, because the private methods are going to accessible within the same scope wherever we are trying to define here. Getting the point? Wherever we are trying to define. For example, if I want to call this particular show method, how we can call here? How we can call this? Any idea? So we'll keep as this particular method as it is here, but I will explain so how we can call this particular private method. So for example, what happens here? If I'm going to write protected something like void, one more method I'm defining, call method. Okay. If I'm trying to write here, now we are getting an error. So why we are getting? Protected is not applicable here. For example, if I'm trying to remove this protected, if I'm trying to remove this particular protected, I'm not getting any error. So by default, this particular method public and abstract. But whenever I'm adding explicitly the protected here, so it is now what we are doing is we are trying to reducing the scope here. So this section yesterday we discussed here the visibility of the access modifier we discussed in the last session here. But now what we need to understand here, you can remove this particular access modifier, you can keep a method like this. Otherwise, whenever you are trying to write, we can make as a public here. Okay, public. So we cannot use the protected. And here, if I'm using the protected, we are getting an error. So for example, what is the error we are getting? I'm using the same protected keyword here. Now we'll see what is the error we are getting. Now you can see illegal modifier for this particular interface method called public, private, abstract, and default. Getting the point? These are all the informations are applicable here. Now you can read this. This is the one of the important messages showing here. Only applicable here public, static, final, or these are all the default one also. It's permitted here. Getting the point? This is one of the important example we need to understand here. Sorry, this is not the message. Now you can read this. This is the error is giving the suggestion. Only public, private, abstract, and default and static here. Getting the point? So we discussed about the default and the static method just now. So by default it will the public and abstract it will available, or you can make this particular abstract here. But now you can see only it is available public, private. So there is no protected here. Getting the point? There is no protected. Now what you understand? So we are getting at variable level protected is not applicable. Same way for this particular method level also we are unable to use this particular protected here. Okay, this is very important example we are discussing here. Now finally I'm going to make abstract here. Any error I'm getting? I'm not getting any error. So what is the default access modifier? Basically public only, because this method is going to implemented by some other implementation class. Because of that, by default, we are going to make as a public here. But if you make private here, we'll see this example how it is going to work. This is the private one here. This is the private one. But private method cannot have a method declaration. For example, private void callback method. Now you can see you are getting an error. Private method, we are not going to declare the method declarations here. Just we can have the method body. If we want to interested to make the methods, we can do what we can do is we can go for this particular private method with the method body, but we cannot define the method declarations like line number 11. Getting the point? So this is not the expected syntax here, but this is the expected syntax. Thus, line number 10. By default, it will provide the modifier as a public, and we are providing the abstract here. Abstract basically what it will do. This method is not yet implemented here. Okay, this is we discussed in the abstract classes section. And the same way, we are having the private method. Okay, now what I will do, I'm going to comment on this example also. So finally, we define the one method, something like a call method. What exactly this particular call method do? So that section we'll discuss here. So here I'm trying to provide as a one para. Okay, one parameter also I'm trying to providing inside this particular call method. Now what we need to understand basically here, whatever the variable we are declaring here, all the variable are final variables. All the variables are final variables. So once you initialize this particular value, we cannot modify the variable value. So that we identified in the previous section. And here you can go for this particular method declarations like this. We'll discuss about the default and static once you are familiar with this particular interfaces example. Now, once I define this particular method, when I'm going to implement this particular method here, getting the point? When I'm going to implement this particular method here. So this particular method I'm going to implement with help of implementing the class here. Okay, implementing this particular class here. So let's see how we can implement this particular class here. Here only inside this particular interface, I'm going to write a one class here, something like client here. So this particular client basically it will try to implement here. So here another keyword we are discussing here, something like implements here. So earlier we discussed about the extends keyword, but right now we are discussing about the implements keyword. So when we can go for this particular interface here, whenever you're trying to implement something from the interface. Getting the point? And the same thing, whenever you're trying to implement from the class, we'll not use the same keyword implements. We'll go for the extends keyword. So class to class relation, we will use the extend, and class to interface, we are going to use the relation called implements, and interface to interface. Getting the point? Interface to interface, internally we'll try to use the same extends keyword. Getting the point? So this is very important information we need to understand here. This is very important information we need to understand here. Public class client, and it is implementing from the what is the name of the interface we are having, something like callback here. Getting the point? So callback. Now using this particular callback, we are trying to implementing it. So why I'm getting this particular error basically here? What is the method we declare inside this particular callback? The call method we need to override here. Okay, here now you can see I'm trying to override the call method. So where we define this particular call method, now here I define the call method. Now I define the call method here. Getting the point? This is very important here. So same method we define inside this particular abstract class. So you can see, so something like a same functionality, abstract void call me, and it is contain the some concrete method. Getting the point? So this is applicable inside this particular abstract class here. Here we can define the any access modifier, but some restriction we have inside this particular interface. The restriction basically protected access modifier we are not going to use, and the remaining access modifier we can use here. Getting the point? So protected as well as private. These two are the access modifier we are not going to use. So the remaining two access modifier we can use, default as well as public here. Now I implemented the method call method, and here we are going to write the code here. Getting the point? So simply I will print the message. I'm not going to write much code here. Callback call with help of this. With this particular param. And here, so this is the non-interface method. Basically, this is a non-interface method. Okay, this is the specific method which I'm trying to write inside this particular client class. So this is the simple message I'm trying to write here. Okay, so client class method. Now observe carefully how we are going to create an object here. Getting the point? How we are going to create a object here. And here we'll try to create an object of this particular client here. Now here only I am going to create an object here. Inside this particular client class, I am trying to generate the main method. Once I generate the main method, what happens here? So if I'm trying to create a callback object. Now you can see whenever I'm trying to create a callback object here, what happening internally, we are getting an error. Callback basically it is a interface. So interface, Ajay suggested, it is a fully abstraction here. Fully abstraction is nothing but it is not contain the normal methods here. Okay. So whenever we are not defining like a fully implementation inside this particular interface here, how we are going to create an object of this particular interface here. Getting the point? This is important we need to understand here. Basically what we need to understand here, callback is an interface. It is not implemented fully, so it is a partial implementation because the call method it is not implemented inside this particular interface. So because of this, now what happening internally, we are getting an error. So we'll see this particular error what exactly it is contained here. Now you can read this, cannot instantiate the type of callback here. The same message, this particular same message we received for the particular class called abstract EA here. Getting the point? Because these are all the partial implementation. Whatever we are writing here, these are all the partial implementation. Now, what we need to understand here, we cannot create an object for this particular callback interfaces. Now, what is the best way of creating an object here? The object creation basically we'll try to create with the help of this particular interfaces here. Okay, with the help of this particular interfaces, we are going to create an object. Now you can see the same callback I'm trying to use here, and here I will create object, client object. Getting the point? Basically, callback is a implementation of this particular client. Now this is an interface, and this is the implementation class. Getting the point? Client is a implementation class. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to create an object of this particular client class, and I'm returning the type basically callback. So this section we discussed in the previous example. Superclass references can access the subclass object here. So is a superclass here? Again, here it is a super interface basically. It is a, but it's going to make the functionality same whatever we discussed the earlier example. Getting the point? This is very important example we need to understand here. After creating this particular client object, now how many methods I can access here? How many methods I can access basically? I can access only one method, something like a call method, and here I'm going to provide the 25 value. So why I'm accessing only the one method? What happened the second method? Because if you observe, go to this particular callback, I am accessing only this particular call method. but I'm trying to access this particular show method. So observe carefully. Here only I'm going to call. Now you can see show method. The show method basically it is giving me an error. The show method basically it is giving me an error. Now what is the use of defining the private method inside the interface? Okay, what is the use of this particular private method inside this particular interfaces here? So basically there is no use. So we can go for this particular private method whenever we are trying to getting the point. So whenever we are trying to call internally. So for example, this show method will use whenever I'm trying to declare default method or the static method. So if I'm trying to define default method, something like a test method, from this particular test method, I can call this show method. I can call this particular show method. So internally, if we want to access internally, we can use this particular private method. Okay, this is very important. We need to understand here. So observe carefully. For internal purpose only, we can go for this particular private method. But external calling, like whenever we are creating an object, we are not going to call this particular show method. Okay, so because of this, here we are getting an error. The client object we cannot use show. I'm comment out. And what about this particular specific method? What about this particular specific method? Like a back dot non. So you can see whatever the method we declare, the line number 10 method we are not able to access here. Any idea why I'm not able to access here? So this is the method I'm trying to call here. Okay, this is the method I'm trying to call, but I'm getting an error. So why I'm getting an error this? Because this example we discussed multiple times in the previous examples here. Any idea why the line number 18 it is giving me an error? Okay, observe carefully what we need to understand here. Callback basically here. Callback basically what we need to understand here. This is callback is a implementation class, like it is a super interface, and inside this particular super interface we don't have the method called non interface method. Getting it? The non interface method basically we did not define inside this particular callback. So as I explained earlier, compile time, this method is going to call in the super related information, and runtime, wherever we created this particular object, the appropriate object class method will call. So right now, what we need to understand here, basically, this is important here. So what is the type here? The type we made as a callback. So as I explained here, back basically it is a type of this particular callback. Now, what we need to understand here? Getting the point. What we need to understand here, callback is the back is a reference variable of this particular callback, and compiler using this particular reference variable, now it will identify this particular callback here. Callback is a one interface. Now it will try to identify the method inside the interface. So inside the interface right now we don't have this particular method. This method we define inside this particular client class. Getting the point? This is very important. But here the object references are same. This section will work on the compile time. Okay. So the equal, before equal section it will work on the compile time, and after equal it will work on the runtime here. Okay. This is very important information we need to understand here. So callback back is equals to new client class we created. So for example, if I'm trying to modify to the client, if I'm trying to modify to this particular client, now observe carefully, I'm ready to access the two methods. So whatever the two method we are having, the two methods I'm accessing here. Why I am accessing basically, right now, this section, it's going to access the compilation code. Inside the compilation, the call is available and the like no interface method also available here. Getting the point. Basically, it is a specific method we define inside this particular client class. And the first method, which is coming from the interface here. Right, two methods are available inside this particular client. So compiler is trying to look up the method. The two methods are available. So because of this, compiler is not giving me any error. But earlier, why it is giving me an error? Because the callback inside this particular callback interface, we don't have a method. This is very important information we need to understand here. Getting back, this is the one of the important information. Let me run this example. Whenever I'm trying to run here, now you can see callback method is called with a 25 value and client class method. So client class method, this is the specific method here. Getting the point. Specific specific client class method here. This is very important example we are discussing regarding this particular interface and the implementation class. Now, what is the hierarchy we are having right now? The hierarchy basically, so here, same thing. The simple inheritance, how we discuss here, same it is applicable here. But here, instead of the class, we are discussing here, callback is an interface. And now it is implementing inside this particular client. Getting the point, inside this particular client here. This is one of the important example we are discussing here. So any questions here? The relation we are going to make as a implements. Implements, we are using the relations here, not extents here. Any questions? Okay, Sai, నీకు ఏమైనా questions ఉన్నాయా?
సార్ ఫస్ట్ లైన్ ఇంటర్ఫేస్ మెథడ్ సార్ అది
ఇంటర్ఫేస్ ఎక్కడ మీరు లైన్ నెంబర్ ఎంత?
1.
ఇది ప్యాకేజ్ కదా, నిన్ననే డిస్కస్ చేసాం కదా ప్యాకేజ్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్. ఇది ఒక ప్యాకేజ్ నేమ్ ని డిఫైన్ చేశాను. ఎందుకంటే సో ఈ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మళ్ళీ కన్ఫ్యూజ్ కాకుండా ఒక ఐడెంటిఫికేషన్ కోసం నేను ఒక డిఫరెంట్ ప్యాకేజ్ క్రియేట్ చేశాను. ఈ ప్యాకేజ్ లో ఇప్పుడు ఏదైతే ఇంటర్ఫేస్ రిలేటెడ్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ డిస్కస్ చేస్తున్నానో ఆ క్లాస్లన్నీ ఈ ప్యాకేజ్ కిందకి వస్తాయి ఇప్పుడు. సో ఎందుకంటే ప్యాకేజ్ ఇంటర్నల్ గా మనం డిస్కస్ చేసినట్టు ఒక స్ట్రక్చర్ ఫాలో అవుతుంది, ఒక డైరెక్టరీ ఫాలో అవుతుంది. కాబట్టి సో మనకి ఈజీగా ఒక ఐడెంటిఫికేషన్ వస్తుంది, ఈ డైరెక్టర్లో ఏం ఎగ్జామ్స్ ఉన్నాయి, ఈ డైరెక్టరీలో ఎలాంటి ఎగ్జామ్స్ ఉన్నాయి. అంటే ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ నేను ఈ క్లయింట్ క్లాస్ ఓపెన్ చేస్తే ఇక్కడ క్లయింట్ అనేది చూసుకుంటే ఇక్కడ మనకి ఇది ఒక 07 అని ఒక ఫోల్డర్ క్రియేట్ చేశాను. దీంట్లో ఎస్ఆర్సి అని ఒక ఫోల్డర్ ఉంది, దీంట్లో కామ్ అని ఒక ఫోల్డర్ ఉంది, కోర్ 07 అని ఒక ఫోల్డర్ ఉంది. ఇక్కడ చూస్తే ఇంటర్ఫేస్ అని ఒక ఫోల్డర్ ఉంది. ఈ ఇంటర్ఫేస్ లో కరెంట్ మనం ఏమైతే ఎగ్జాంపుల్ డిస్కస్ చేసామో ఆ 2 ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఇక్కడ ఉన్నాయి. సో ఇంటర్నల్ గా ఎప్పుడైతే అంటే ఫర్ ఫ్యూచర్ రెఫరెన్సెస్ మనకి ఈజీగా ఈ ఫోల్డర్ స్ట్రక్చర్ ఈజీగా ఐడెంటిఫై అవుతుంది. ఇంటర్ఫేస్ కింద ఎలాంటి ఎగ్జాంపుల్ డిస్కస్ చేసుకున్నాము, అండ్ ఇక్కడ చూసుకుంటే ఇన్హెరిటెన్స్ కింద ఎన్ని ఎగ్జాంపుల్ డిస్కస్ చేసుకున్నాము. అండ్ సో దిస్ ఇస్ ద డిఫరెంట్ అబ్స్ట్రాక్ట్ రిలేటెడ్ ఎన్ని ఎగ్జాంపుల్ డిస్కస్ చేసుకున్నాము. అండ్ మై ప్యాకేజ్, సో ఎస్టర్డే మై ప్యాకేజ్ రిలేటెడ్ ఇవన్నీ ప్యాకేజ్ రిలేటెడ్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మనం డిస్కస్ చేసాము. ఓకే, ఇవన్నీ ఆబ్జెక్ట్. సో దీస్ ఆర్ ఆల్ ద బేసిక్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్. సో ఐ మేడ్ యాజ్ ఏ ఆబ్జెక్ట్. ఓకే, ఇలా ఒక ప్రాజెక్ట్ స్ట్రక్చర్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తుంది. సో ప్రాజెక్ట్ స్ట్రక్చర్ ఇస్ క్రియేటెడ్ బై హూమ్? ప్యాకేజ్. ప్యాకేజ్ ఇంటర్నల్ గా ఒక స్ట్రక్చర్ ని క్రియేట్ చేస్తుంది కాబట్టి ఓకే, ఒక స్ట్రక్చర్ ని క్రియేట్ చేస్తుంది కాబట్టి ఇలా మనం ప్యాకేజ్ ని క్రియేట్ చేసుకుంటున్నాం. అర్థమవుతుందా? దిస్ ఈస్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ హియర్. ఇంకేమైనా క్వశ్చన్సా ఇది కాకుండా? Okay, so this is one of the important example we are discussing. Inside the interfaces, we define the some methods here, and some of the default method we define. So this default method we'll discuss later, and the private method. Now we understand here we can define the private method, but there is no use here. Externally, we are not going to call this private method, but internally we can call this particular private method whenever we are defining public or static method. Getting the only the private method we can call from the public or default, because when you were trying to make method as a abstract here, from the abstract method you cannot call the private method. So for example, what happens here if I'm trying to call, what happens here? So let me try here. Super dot, what is the method we are having here? What is the name of the method we are having? Something like show method. Now you can see, now you can see, so still here we are getting an error here. Now you can see the show method is undefined in the type called object here. Getting the point? Now it is trying to look up the method in the object class. Now you can read the error one more time. Basically, the method show is undefined in the type of object here. So type basically it is a one of the object class is describing the information here. But inside this particular object class, we don't have a method called show method. Getting the point? This is important here. Even though we are trying to implementing from this particular callback interface, now super keyword is trying to use the super class here, not the interface here. Okay, here also we are not able to use the show method. So this is important here. Most of the cases we are not going to write the private methods inside the interfaces, because interfaces we are not going to create a object here, so directly we cannot access the method. But only the two cases we can create inside the one default and another one is static. So those interface like the private method we can call here. Okay, this is one of the basic example we discuss here. But what we need to understand here, how we are going to define this example, how we are going to write the methods here. You can remove this particular abstract as well. You can remove the abstract as well inside this particular interfaces. Now, if I'm going to run the same example, if I'm going to run the same example here, now you can see, now you can see still we are getting we are not getting any error. Happily, we are able to run this example. But why we are running this? Because by default, compiler will provide public and abstract for this particular method. For this particular method, so that we can exclude the public and abstract keyword, or if you are interested to write, so it's fine here. But whenever when we are trying to discuss about the abstract classes, so we need to define the abstract keyword. It's a mandatory keyword here, and inside the interface it is an optional keyword, because compiler will add the public and abstract information to the particular method which we are going to write inside the interface here, not inside the class here. Okay, this is important here. Yes, good question. So now observe carefully. So this is an interface we defined here, and this is the scope we are having here. Now I'm trying to write the class here, something like in. So it's like a interface class. So what happening internally? Any error we are getting here? So we are not getting any errors here. So directly we can write the variables here. Int value 25 I'm having, and void. So nested method, and what I will do, I'm going to call the value here. So this is the value we are trying to use inside the whatever the value we define the line number 4. For example, after printing this, now if I'm trying to modify here, after printing this particular value, if I'm trying to change to the 45, now you can see I'm getting an error. Why I am getting an error? Basically because value is a final variable. Whatever the line number 4 we define the variable value, it is a final variable. So we cannot modify the value. We cannot modify the value. Getting the point? This is very important information we need to understand. Whatever the variable we are going to declare inside the interfaces, all the variable by default public and final. Okay. If you are not interested, you can add public, static, final. These three are the modifier applicable at the variable level. Okay. So for this only, because only I define this information. These are all the public, static, finals are applicable whenever we are trying to define the variable here. By default, if I'm not adding it here, I'm not defining anything. So what is the access modifier here? Public and final. The final variable we cannot modify because once we initialize the value. For example, if I'm trying to remove this, here also I'm trying to remove this particular 10 value. Now I'm getting an error here. So why I'm getting an error? Because the final variable must be initializer. The final variable we need to initialize here. So this is the important here. So now you can see the blank final field value may not have been initialized here. Getting the point? So this is the error we are getting here. So final variable, it needs to be initialize the value. Because of that, I initialize the value. Now same value I'm trying to access here. But here, what is the best way of accessing this nested method? What is the best way of accessing this particular nested method? So this section we discussed in the previous example. Now we'll see how we can access this particular object here. Inside this particular callback here, now what I will do, we'll try to define this callback BSC callback dot, what we can define here. Now you can see int class we are getting, but here we need to create the object of this particular int class. Now you can see what happening internally. We are getting an error here. Now you can see callback cannot resolve the variable here. Cannot resolve the variable. So what is the best way of creating a object creation? Because we created, this is a structure for the nested classes. Those nested classes are, we will call it as a non-static nested classes. But right now I'm trying to create a same object because here I cannot go for the new keyword. So why I cannot use the new keyword? Because interfaces object we cannot create here. So observe carefully. So what I will do, the same behavior I will make this. I will comment out this section, and here back dot new instance class. Now you can see type mismatch cannot convert callback dot in class to callback. Getting the point? Here we are getting the mismatch, like it is a type mismatch. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to converting into this, but what happening internally? So it's giving me an error here still. Getting the point? Now you can see illegal enclosing instance specification, enclosing specific like type call. If I'm going to remove this, now what happens internally is expecting to write the method body. So basically it is trying to write the method body. So here back dot new int class. So whatever the int class we created here. So this is not the expected way to create an object of this particular int class. So let's see how we can create. So for example, if it is a static class, what happens internally? Back dot the instance class. So still we cannot create object of this particular object. But earlier how we created static classes directly we can access with the help of this particular outer interfaces. So how we can write here? Okay, so now understand here, I want to provide the example, like I want to provide the different ways how we can write this particular object creations here. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to create the object first. What is the way of creating an object here? Something like how we can create. Now the best way of creating, instead of creating this callback, we can keep as it is callback dot. Instead of creating this, here we can create an object like this. New, I'm going to create callback dot enter class. Getting the point? Observe carefully, callback dot enter class. Now I'm trying to assign into this particular object here. Getting the point? This is important. But object, how we are creating it? No callback dot int class. So here finally we are trying to create the nested class object here. And using this int class in, what is the method we are having? Something like while only. Let me see the method. What is we are having? This is. Now I'm calling the nested method, which is we define inside this particular interface here. Sorry, inside this particular nested class. So now you can see interface value 10. Getting the point? Where we define this particular interface value 10? Here, the interface value here we define the interface value. But what we need to understand here, whenever we are trying to define the class inside this particular interface, this is the way of creating this particular object here. So using the new, first we are defining the interface, and finally we are defining this particular class here, because this is the path here. Callback dot int class. Callback dot int class. But we try to create with help of this particular references, but still we could not create an object. Okay, so this is the way of creating this particular objects here. So any questions here? Okay, this is very important example we are discussing, and here 21 line. Okay, so basically this 21 line, what we are doing here now, what we need to understand here, because this is the scope. The scope I open line number 3 and I close line number 25. Inside this, I'm trying to create a one class here. Here I'm trying to create a one class here. Whenever I'm trying to create a class of this particular, this is the class I want to create object. But if it is a class, if we define the outside of this particular callback interface, directly we can create object of this particular class, because this class is not dependent with any other. But right now, this particular class we created inside the scope of this particular callback here. Okay, inside the scope of this particular callback. Now, if I want to access this particular class, getting the pen, if I want to access this particular int class object information, now what is the best way? Because first we need to specify this, later we need to specify this, because directly we cannot access this. Without this particular interface, we cannot access the int class here. Because of that, what I'm doing is I'm trying to providing callback is the interface, and int class is the inside this particular interface we created here. Inside this particular callback, we come up with the one class called so interface class. Okay, this is a way of creating an object of this particular int class, and using the int class, I'm calling the nested method, and I think we can access the variable also, val. Okay, whatever the value we define, the value I'm trying to access, the value we are trying to print with 25. So let's see, here also we are having 25. Okay, here I've given as a 25. Now I modified to the 250. Okay, now I'm modifying to 250 because the param also we are providing 25. So we are getting the same values. Now you can see, now I modify the value. Now we are getting as a 250 here. Getting the point. But only the important here when you are trying to define the classes inside this particular interfaces. So this is the way of creating an objects inside this. And back to here, first we need to specify the callback references, and finally we can references the nested class here. So is it clear? So this is the one of the important example we discuss about the interface related. Now what I will do, here I'm going to provide the one other important example. So same thing, like here basically client is a one implementation class. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to implement the one more implementation class. So where is the interface here? Here I'm trying to define the one more implementation class. So something like another client. So another client. Whenever we are trying to write this particular another client, again what I'm doing here, I'm trying to use the implements. So why I'm using the implements? Because so class and interface relations we are making here. So this is not the class to class relation. So we are making class to interface relations here. Now what is the interface we are having? Something like callback here. We are having callback here. So whenever we are trying to implement the callback interface here, now we need to override the method. So what is the method we need to override here? Something like another client here. Now you can see whenever I'm trying to override the another client, again I'm trying to overriding the call method. We'll try to implement here. Getting the point? Here I'm trying to implement the call method. Now you can see here what exactly I'm doing here. I'm trying to provide the so another version of this call method. So the first version we define inside this particular client class, and the second version, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to define inside this particular another client. So this is the one more println I'm trying to print. So here square, what is the square value? The parent squared is, here I'm going to print this, and here we need to write the braces because I'm going to multiply this particular parameter. This is important example we are discussing. Okay, this is the another important example we are discussing here, and here only I'm going to write main method. So inside this particular main method, now what I'm doing is getting the point. Inside this particular main method, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to create an object. So what is an object we can create? Something like another client is the best option. So another client is the best option. Why I'm trying to create another client here? Another client basically is a subclass. So if you try to create any specific method inside this particular subclass here, so those methods also we can access. Otherwise we'll try to access the superclass information here. Getting the point. Otherwise, the superclasses access information we can access. So another client is equals to another client, and after creating this client to dot call method I'm providing, and here I'm going to provide as a 3. Getting the point. So this is the 3 value I'm providing, and here I will try to print this client to dot value, where I given this particular value. Basically this value I given inside the interface, but right now I'm trying to access from our class call, implementation class call, another client. Okay, this is important information here. Now I'm calling this particular call method. So another version of call method is call here. The particular param we are trying to print, like here we are doing the square operations here, and this is the value of whatever the value, the variable we define inside this particular callback here. Now you can see this is the value. Okay, this is the value we given as a 10. Now I'm trying to access. From where this 10 value I'm accessing it? From this particular another client, and I created another client object here. From the another client object, I'm trying to call the variable name something like value. Okay, this is important information we need to understand here. So finally, what we understand here, so this method we define inside this particular callback interface, any number of classes it's going to implement here. So it is again common functionality. Okay, the common methods here. Common methods we can define inside the interface. Okay, this is, we can call it as a interface section, and it is going to implemented by multiple classes here. Getting the point? So right now, first one client one we created, and another one another client we created. These are all the child classes. The child classes are implementing from this particular interface called callback here. Okay, but what is the difference between interface and abstract class? This is important here. What is the difference between interface and abstract class here? Basically, the main differences here, inside the interfaces, we are not going to write the concrete method, but the concrete method we can define with help of this particular default and static. Other than this particular default and static, so we are not going to write any other methods here. Right now we understand. And callback interface, like this is an interface. If I'm trying to create a constructor, if I'm trying to create a default constructor, now what happening internally? Now you can see, so yeah, I'm trying to define the one default constructor for this particular callback here. Now read this error, interfaces cannot have constructors. Getting the point? Interfaces cannot have constructor. The whatever the interfaces we define here, the interface is not going to, it's not going to have the constructor. But abstract classes we can define the constructor. For example, if I'm going to write this, what is the name of the constructor? Abstract EA. So now you can see here we are defining the constructors here. Here we are defining the constructors. The section is not applicable to this particular interfaces here. Okay, so these are all some differences we are having. So interfaces, it's fully abstract here. Fully abstract basically. The abstract classes are partially abstract. Okay, this is the main differences between interfaces and abstract classes. Now we'll try to continue the same interfaces related example. So we'll see the tomorrow nested interfaces, and once we are completed this particular interfaces example, we'll move on to the one of the important example call exception handling. But tomorrow we'll try to discuss about the interfaces section. So most probably day after tomorrow we'll continue the exception handling. Okay, so today evening we'll try to see the important example call, how we can write the nested interfaces. So nested interface we'll discuss here, and later the default method, static method, how we are defining inside this particular interfaces, those section also. So today evening we are going to discuss here. Any questions? Any questions regarding our today's session? Okay. సాయినికి ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయా? Okay, so if we don't have anything, yeah, we'll continue evening.